Anansi approached Mmoatia's lair cautiously, expecting danger at every turn. Suddenly, Elira rushed towards him, her arms wide open, calling his name. "Anansi!" she cried out, throwing herself into his embrace. Anansi was happy to see her again. As Elira gazed into his eyes, she whispered, "I've missed you, Anansi." Then she leaned in and kissed him. As their lips touched, a strange feeling washed over Anansi. The woman before Anansi transformed into Mmoatia herself. Suddenly, everything around him changed. The fairies that had been flying peacefully were now dark and sinister, their faces twisted with malice. The kiss had enchanted Anansi, and he could no longer think clearly. He stared blankly ahead as Mmoatia laughed, her wicked smile spreading across her face. From behind her, Elira screamed from inside a wooden cage guarded by fierce trolls. "Anansi! Anansi!" As Anansi traveled on his quest, he eventually reached the Gate of Realms, a place where the boundaries between the world of men and the world of spirits met. The air around the gate shimmered with strange energy, and towering trees arched over it like sentinels. Standing before the gate were the spirit guards, their bodies glowing faintly in the dim light. At the head of them stood their leader, Nyame, a figure of great power and wisdom. Her eyes sparkled with knowledge of both the past and the future. As Anansi approached, Nyame greeted him with a calm, knowing smile. "We have been expecting you, Anansi, grandson of Asari Kwame." Anansi bowed respectfully, sensing the importance of the moment. He knew he would need their wisdom for the journey ahead. "I need your wise guidance, great Nyame. I am on a quest and my time is short," Anansi said. Nyame's face grew serious as she spoke. "The spear you seek is no longer one but two. The shaft is with Osebo in his lair to the north. The point is with Mmoatia in the west," Nyame revealed. Anansi's brow furrowed at the news. He had expected the spear to be difficult to find, but now he realized his journey would be even more challenging than he had thought. "Thank you, great Nyame," he said. Nyame reached into her robes and pulled out a small gourd, handing it to Anansi. "Take this." Anansi turned the gourd over in his hands, examining it closely. "A power potion?" Nyame shook her head. "No, but it will be useful when the time comes," she said. Anansi, trusting Nyame's wisdom, nodded and carefully tied the gourd to his waist. "Beware of the fairy, son of Kwame. No man has ever returned from her lair," said Nyame. Nyame's words weighed heavily on Anansi. He had heard stories of Mmoatia, the dangerous fairy queen, and the many warriors who had fallen under her spell. But Anansi was determined. He had no choice. His people were counting on him. With that, Nyame stepped aside, and the gates to the Forest of Vengeance slowly opened. The trees beyond the gate seemed darker and more twisted than any Anansi had seen before. A chill ran down his spine, but he steadied himself, knowing he had to continue. Meanwhile, deep within the Forest of Vengeance, in the dark, twisted lair of the evil fairies, two hulking troll guards stood watch, their heavy breathing the only sound in the eerie silence. Princess Elira sat imprisoned inside a wooden cage, her mind racing. Suddenly, a woman stepped forward, her face hidden in the dim light, her robe softly glowing. She sniggered, her voice full of cruel delight. "He's coming," the woman said, her voice dripping with mischief. "I can smell my handsome warrior a mile away." She cackled and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Elira alone, her heart pounding with anxiety. Anansi was coming, but was he walking into a trap? A few hours later, Anansi found himself approaching Osebo's lair. The trees loomed tall and twisted, their branches reached out like gnarled hands. The air was heavy and humid, with a strange fog clinging to the ground, making the path ahead almost invisible. The only sound is the distant rustle of leaves, but Anansi senses something watching him. Suddenly, the eerie silence is broken by a deep, low growl. Anansi halts, his hand instinctively reaching for his bow. Emerging from the shadows was Osebo, a towering figure with the sleek, muscular build of a leopard, but the face of a man. His sharp amber eyes locked onto Anansi with cold intent. Osebo's voice rumbles like distant thunder. "You dare trespass in my domain, grandson of Asari Kwame?" Anansi, trying to keep his composure, straightens and meets Osebo's gaze. "I've come for the shaft of the spear, Osebo. It belongs to my people." Osebo's face contorted in anger, exposing sharp teeth. "It's mine now. You mortals are unworthy of it." And without warning, Osebo pounced, moving with incredible speed. Anansi barely managed to dodge to the side, feeling the rush of air as Osebo's claws swiped through the space where he stood just a moment before. Anansi fires an arrow, but Osebo deflects it effortlessly with the back of his hand. "You are no warrior, Anansi. Your tricks won't save you here." Osebo scoffed. He charged at Anansi, but Anansi was quick on his feet, darting between trees to avoid Osebo's powerful strikes. At one point, Osebo's claws grazed Anansi's arm, drawing blood. Suddenly, Osebo moved with such speed that Anansi was caught off guard. Osebo pins him against a large tree. "You should have stayed in your web, spider. Now, your life ends here." In a moment of desperation, Anansi reached into his pouch and threw a handful of blinding dust into Osebo's face. Osebo stumbled back, his vision clouded. Anansi, gasping for air, slipped away quickly. Osebo roared in frustration. "Run, spider! Run while you can! I will find you, and when I do, there will be no escape!" Anansi, hidden among the thick vines and branches, breathing heavily, his body trembling from the close encounter. His mind raced. He knew he couldn't face Osebo in direct combat again, but a plan began to form in his head. Osebo may be strong, but even the mightiest cats can be caught in a web. Anansi pondered out loud. A few hours later, Osebo was resting in his lair, jealously guarding the spear shaft, when he heard Anansi calling out to him. "Osebo! The mighty hunter? How do you expect to keep that spear when you can't even catch me?" Anansi mocked. Osebo's lips curled back, showing his sharp teeth as a growl rumbled in his throat. "Anansi, you talk too much for a rat who barely escaped with his life. Even the monkey knows not to mock the lion." "A lion is wise," said Anansi. "But you?" "Nah," Anansi mocked. With that, Osebo sprang after him. The leopard was fast, but Anansi was quicker and lighter, darting around corners. As they raced through the forest, Anansi glanced over his shoulder, calling out again. "Is that all you've got, Osebo?" "Even the tortoise would have caught me by now," Anansi called out as he ran. Osebo's anger flared. But suddenly, Anansi took a leap, landing safely on the other side. Osebo crashed with a thunderous thud into the forest floor, into a deep pit. A trap Anansi had set for him. Osebo roared in fury, thrashing around as he tried to climb out. But the sides of the pit were steep, and the more he struggled, the more tangled he became in the sticky webs at the bottom. Anansi peered down into the pit, smiling. "Osebo," Anansi mocked. "When one climbs a tree too quickly, they miss the ripe fruit." "I will get out of this, Anansi, and you will pay," Osebo roared. But Anansi wasn't worried. He knew Osebo couldn't escape the trap anytime soon. Calmly, Anansi entered Osebo's lair and took possession of the spear shaft. Anansi approached Mmoatia's lair cautiously, expecting danger at every turn. But to his surprise, the area was calm and peaceful. The forest was alive with beauty. Fairies darted through the air, their wings shimmering in the soft light. It didn't feel like a place of danger at all. Still, Anansi kept his guard up, knowing that appearances could be deceiving. Suddenly, Elira rushed towards him, her arms wide open, calling his name. "Anansi!" she cried out, throwing herself into his embrace. Anansi was happy to see her again, but something still didn't feel right. He glanced around, looking for any sign of Mmoatia, the wicked fairy queen. It was strange that he hadn't encountered any resistance. "Elira, where is Mmoatia?" Anansi asked, his voice low and cautious. Elira smiled and replied, "Mmoatia couldn't find me. She wandered off into the deepest part of the forest. We are safe now." Anansi relaxed, relieved to see her safe. As Elira gazed into his eyes, she whispered, "I've missed you, Anansi." Then she leaned in and kissed him. As their lips touched, a strange feeling washed over Anansi. The woman before Anansi transformed into Mmoatia herself. Suddenly, everything around him changed. The fairies that had been flying peacefully were now dark and sinister, their faces twisted with malice. The kiss had enchanted Anansi, and he could no longer think clearly. He stared blankly ahead as Mmoatia laughed, her wicked smile spreading across her face. From behind her, Elira screamed from inside a wooden cage guarded by fierce trolls. "Anansi! Anansi!" she called, but he couldn't hear her. Mmoatia walked over to Elira, gloating. "He can't hear or see you now. Anansi is mine forever," she said with satisfaction. Elira was upset. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice full of anger and frustration. Mmoatia chuckled. "I love warriors, but they don't live forever. When Asarikwame's spear landed in my lair and you were banished here 40 years later, I knew a handsome warrior would come. Now, with Asarikwame's spear, I will make Anansi live forever and be my toy for eternity. And who better to be my pet than the grandson of Asarikwame himself?" Elira clenched her fists in anger. "You will pay for this, Mmoatia, I swear." Mmoatia only scoffed. "A chicken does not mock the eagle without reason. Save your threats, girl." Just then, Anansi walked over to Mmoatia's side, his eyes empty. "My love, is everything all right?" he asked, his voice calm but under Mmoatia's spell. Mmoatia smiled sweetly at him. "Everything is fine, my dear. Meet Elira." She gestured to the princess, locked in the cage. Anansi greeted Elira with a blank expression, not recognizing her. Elira cried out to him, but he did not respond. She then noticed the small gourd tied to Anansi's waist. She knew it held the power to break the spell. But just as she realized this, Mmoatia grabbed Anansi and led him away. For the next 2 days, Anansi remained under Mmoatia's spell. She made him polish her nails and massage her feet, treating him like a servant. Anansi, still enchanted, was happy to serve her, unaware of what was happening. Elira, meanwhile, waited for the perfect moment to act. She watched closely, looking for any opportunity to free Anansi, but Mmoatia never left Anansi for a moment. She was indeed hungry for a warrior. Then, on the 3rd day, a fairy whispered something into Mmoatia's ear, and the queen hurried off, leaving Anansi behind. This was her chance. Elira knew she had to move quickly. The troll guarding her cage turned to check on her, but Elira was already gone. The troll panicked, opening the cage and rushing inside to find her. Elira dropped down from the ceiling and knocked him out with a swift kick. Another guard tried to stop her, but Elira was no helpless princess. She had been trained in combat by her father himself. Within moments, she had defeated the second guard. Elira rushed over to Anansi, who was asleep under Mmoatia's spell. She quickly untied the gourd from his waist and poured the powder over his face. Anansi sneezed and woke up with a start, blinking in confusion. "Where am I?" he asked, looking around in shock. Elira grabbed his arm. "There's no time to explain. We need to hide before Mmoatia returns. They hurried to a safe spot in the forest, and there, Elira told Anansi everything that had happened. Anansi was alarmed when he realized how much time had passed. "I've been here for 2 days?" he said, his eyes wide. "We have to leave today. If I don't return, Zuko will destroy my village." Elira had a plan. "I need your help, Anansi. Together we can defeat Mmoatia." Anansi nodded, ready to do whatever was needed. Anansi cut down a large tree for Elira. She held a carving knife in her hand. "Now let's give Mmoatia a warrior she'll live with forever," she said with a mischievous smile. A few hours later, Mmoatia returned. She saw the statue standing there and smiled. "My handsome pet," she said playfully, "you've been a naughty boy. You left Osebo in a pit, but I begged him to forgive you." She wrapped her arms around the statue, but as she did, she realized something was wrong. Her arms were stuck. Mmoatia struggled, but the more she fought, the more she became trapped in the sticky tar. She called out for help, but there was no one to save her.